Hello all, warm welcome to this lecture series on organizational behavior. I am Dr. MP Ganesh and this is going to be the third section of our first chapter, which is on Introduction to Organizational Behavior. A quick recap of what happened in the previous two lectures. So what we did in the previous two lectures was to define organizational behavior. So in order to understand what is organizational behavior, we need to explain what is an organization, what is behavior, and what is organizational behavior. In fact, we spend considerable amount of time in understanding these three terms or these three concepts. In the second lecture, we understood or we tried to look at what are the basic assumptions of organizational behavior as a discipline, and also what are the fundamental ideas which are basis for organizational behavior as a discipline. We also looked at the three levels in which organizational behavior can be understood, or how an individual's behavior can be understood at three different levels. In fact, I've given you a homework. If you remember the homework, I asked you to answer me whether the larger social group has an influence on individual behavior or individuals influence the larger social group like organizations. What is your answer? Is it A, which is larger social group strongly influence individual behavior, or is it B, which is individuals strongly influence larger social groups like organization? In fact, both are correct. Okay, I'll explain why both are correct. I'll give an example. Okay, let's say in your college or in your institution, in your workplace, how will you call your supervisor or your teacher or your boss? Many times in India, we call our teacher or boss as sir or ma'am. Even if we call them by their first name, we'll use this, let's say Ganesh sir, or ma'am, Chitra ma'am, and things like that. Okay, so why do we call our supervisors or teachers by by using sir or ma'am many a times? Okay, why? Because it is part of the organization culture. So organizational culture is nothing but the larger social norm in that particular group. So social norm means unwritten rule. Okay, so if you are a newcomer to this social group like this particular organization, you need to understand what are the social norms and you will try to adapt to these social norms. For example, if you are a European student, usually in Europe, people will call their supervisors or teachers by their first name. Okay, so let's say an European or somebody from a Western culture comes to India, and they will find this to be new. Okay, and they will find it a little bit uncomfortable in the beginning, and slowly they will adapt to this new culture. Okay, so let's say you have worked in an organization where you call your boss by their name, first name, but you have moved to another organization where everybody calls each other by sir, ma'am. Initially you will take some time, but slowly you will try to adapt, or at least initially you will not resist too much and behave in a way you want to many a times. Okay, so in that sense, larger social group influence the individual behavior. So how does individual behavior influence larger social group? So even the same idea of culture, how the unwritten social norm evolves over a period of time through individuals' behavior. Maybe when the organization was young, the smaller group which existed at that point, they created this culture. Okay, and this culture carried over for later points in time for the organization. Or sometimes when a new leader comes, the leader can also change the culture of the organization. So what I'm trying to say is, both individuals influence larger social group and larger social groups influence individuals. So why this understanding is important? Why do you need to understand this dependency of top down and bottom up influences. Why? Because if you want to understand human behavior, you cannot generalize just by saying a plus equal to or 1 plus 1 equal to 2. Okay, so if you want to define a certain behavior, understand certain behavior, you need to understand both the influence of larger social group on individuals influence on larger social groups, and also how these two things interdepend on each other, how they intertwine each other, this macro influences and micro influences. So you need to understand the complexities involved in understanding human behavior. In fact, this is what I've been keep on insisting throughout my lectures, looking at things in a critical manner and trying to understand the context of the particular behavior. So why study organizational behavior? Not necessarily you have to be a practitioner to apply organizational behavior. Even at this point as a student, for you, understanding organizational behavior is very important, for the simple reason that the institute or the college where you study is also an organization. Okay, you don't need to be a manager to use or to apply organizational behavior theories and models. Even at this level, you can understand people around you, you can understand why certain things influence in a certain way, to understand how groups within the institute work, the group dynamics. You can also use these organizational behavior concepts to build trust in your group or in your friendship and things like that. So even if you're not working, organizational behavior is going to help you a lot. Especially if you're a working professional, organizational behavior has three important functions. One, to understand human behavior or to understand employee behavior. I'll give a simple example. Okay, many of these large manufacturing organizations, organizations which are like very huge, which are there for many years, they find a very important challenge, which is attrition at the middle level management, especially when people who have spent considerable amount of time, 5 to 7 years, they quit the organization. And for the organization, it is not a good thing, because these people who have worked there for significant number of years, 5 to 7 years at the middle level management, when they leave, you lose a skilled workforce. Somebody who has been trained in the organization for so long, and somebody who has established so many networks in the organization. When someone at that particular level, at that number of work experience leave, they also take the connections, the unwritten knowledge, the tacit knowledge, the softer knowledge, which cannot be recorded in the organization, with them when they leave. Okay, for example, I've been working here for 5 to 7 years. I understand or I build connections outside the organization, like with suppliers, with customers, with other organizational entities. So when I leave, these connections are also lost for the organization. So people leaving at this level is a significant level of cost for the organization, both financial cost and social cost. So how to retain these employees? Okay, so first we need to understand why people at this level with this number of work experience in these kind of organizations leave. In an IT company, maybe attrition, employee quitting the organization might be more in the first 2 years at the lower level. So in bigger manufacturing organizations, people leave at the middle level, 5 to 7 years of work experience. So why people leave at this stage? Just think. Is it because they are not paid well? Is it because they don't like the organization, they get bored? What is the reason? One important reason is career growth. At this level in large organizations, especially manufacturing organizations which are bottom heavy, which means there are many people at the bottom and very few people at the top, when you are at a middle level, you feel there are very less chances for you to grow to the top. Okay, so it's not just about money. You cannot retain them by saying, okay, we'll pay you more. It's also about, the kind of recognition you get when you go to the top, the status you get when you go to the top. Okay, so this idea can be explained, or this particular idea that people at this level are motivated by these needs comes from the theory Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which says employees at different levels, not just employees, humans at different levels, they get satisfied by, or they are motivated by different types of needs. So initially, people are driven by job security or pay, things like that. At certain level, people are driven by the kind of work environment or friends they have. At a certain level, people are driven by recognition. Certain level, people are driven by growth and things like that. So maybe at middle level, when they spend 5 to 7 years, they are driven by recognition. Okay, so you understand that using this theory of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So now you can predict employee reactions or employee behavior. So let's say you know that this particular employee has been working there for these many years at the middle level, and you know that, or you can anticipate that there are more chances this person will feel stagnated and try to leave, or maybe quit the organization. So you can predict vulnerable group, or groups with high chances that they might leave. So what can you do? You can plan for effective interventions. So interventions not necessarily paying more. So what can you do when people are driven by growth needs or recognition needs? You cannot necessarily promote everyone to the top, because the organization structure may not allow so many people moving to the top. So what can you do? So usually one thing organizations like this do is they have job rotation kind of interventions, which means instead of moving them vertically, you can move them horizontally. Send them to a newer department, give them newer responsibilities, help them learn new areas, new skill sets which are required for new functions and things like that. So employees will feel that they are in a continuous learning process. It's not like they have stagnated. Okay, so if you can understand a simple theory or a very basic theory like Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory, can be very useful to understand these kind of problems in organizations, predict and intervene in the right way. Okay, so there are many theories like this which can be very, very useful and application oriented. So if you study organizational behavior, it will help you understand or help you master these things. Okay, so like I said, organizational behavior has a lot of application in organizations, especially in the area of human resource management. So almost all organizations have this department called human resource management department. So the role of human resource management department is to select the right kind of people, train them properly, evaluate their performance in a right way, reward them so that they are motivated, and also help them have a better quality of life in the work, or help in employee welfare. So in all these functions of human resource management, organizational behavior as a discipline can contribute to a larger extent. For example, selection. In selection, the basic idea of selection is finding out the right person for the right job. So being a right person for the right job is not necessarily about the kind of skill set you have. It is also about the kind of attitude one has, the kind of personality attribute, or the personality qualities of the employee. All these things are very important in recruitment. So things like psychometry, measuring these qualities and trying to see how much a person will fit into this particular job. I'll give an example. Let's say you are recruiting for a marketing job. Okay, so apart from knowledge in marketing or a degree in marketing, what else do you require or expect from a person who who's going to work in this marketing kind of a job, where you have to go out, sales kind of a job. You have to go out, talk to people, persuade them, should be able to convincingly, make the sales pitch and things like that. You would like someone or a person who is very extroverted. Extroverted means someone who enjoys socializing, likes to talk, likes to communicate, and also someone who has the capacity to negotiate or will be able to influence others. Okay, convince, persuasiveness. So all these qualities you will look for, not just the knowledge in sales and marketing. So psychology or organizational behavior helps you recruit people with these qualities for this particular job. And also another important area in selection where organizational behavior can be very useful is biases in selection. Especially in interviews, there are many individual biases of the interviewers will influence their selection decision, like stereotyping. You have certain assumptions about, but these are the things which reflect a deeper quality. Somebody speaks very good English, you assume that this person is knowledgeable. Somebody who has a certain body language, you assume that this person will be confident. So these are some of the assumptions or biases we make as interviewers. So knowledge of organizational behavior will help select people who are part of selection to overcome these biases. Second important area where, like I said, organizational behavior can help managers is performance evaluation and performance management. So what kind of criteria we can use to evaluate performance? So when you evaluate performance in workplace, how will you define performance? Is it just measure, tangible things like observable numbers, or is it other things like leadership qualities or willingness to learn and things like that? So how do you measure these qualities when you evaluate a employee in workplace? And also similarly, evaluation biases. So if you are evaluating, what kind of biases can happen? If you are a supervisor, you are evaluating a subordinate, what kind of biases can happen? One important bias or common bias evaluators or managers have when they evaluate subordinate is halo effect. Halo effect means you look at 2-3 qualities and then you generalize the employee performance. Okay, so for example, in a classroom, when there are some students who will nod, who will show interest in the class. Teacher may assume these students will perform more. When they correct their papers, you will match that face and think this person is a very interested student, so committed student. So unknowingly we give more marks. Similarly in workplace also this can happen. And the third area, which is employee welfare in human resource management, OB can contribute to a very significant level, more specifically in stress management. Especially in recent days, all these service jobs like IT or hospitality sector, there are a lot of stress which these employees undergo. So organizational behavior can help employees overcome stress and avoid burnout. Okay, so like I said, application or where can we apply organizational behavior? One, improving quality of work life. So when I say quality of work life, it's not just people behavior in work. So if you remember, in one of those earlier videos on the brief description of this course, I spoke about workspace and workplace. So what is the difference? Workspace or workplace is the place where you work, people around you, the physical infrastructure, the culture of the organization and things like that. Workspace is the area of work, which means work is not necessarily which you leave after you come back from your office or from your workplace. You carry the influence of the work. So we call it work-life balance and all those things. So for example, the stress at your work will also influence your family life or your personal life. Similarly, what happens in your family life or personal life will also influence your work, both positively and negatively. Okay, so understanding these dynamics will help managers come up with better interventions to make this as a positive experience. So by doing this, we can improve employee performance in long run. Okay, when employee performance is better in long run, not necessarily tangible performances like organizational commitment, performances like extra role performance, which I mentioned earlier, which is helping your co-workers, loyalty towards the organization, things like that. In long run, it will help the organizational effectiveness. So these kind of organizations which have committed workforce, loyal workforce, happy workforce, will perform better in long run. So organizations which stay for very long period of time in a successful manner are the ones which have these kind of employees, not just high performing employees, but committed and happy employees. Okay, so these are the areas where OB can be applied, or understanding of organizational behavior can be applied. So I'll stop here. In the next chapter, we are going to look at history of OB, or what are significant time periods in the development of OB as a discipline. If you look at the last point, I have mentioned about world wars or industrial psychology, which means during World War, there's a significant amount of improvement in understanding human behavior in workplace, or industrial psychology as a discipline evolved a lot during World War. It is very ironical, something very negative like World War, which helped us understand or helped in the area of organizational behavior. I want you to think about why this would have happened. Just do a Google search or just think and try to come up with some understanding of why World War would have contributed to developments in industrial psychology. So we'll meet in the next lecture, and meanwhile have a happy day and stay well. Bye.